To talk more on the release of Bemba and the politics of the DRC, we have invited Channel Africa reporter and analyst Nixon Katembo, who joins us live in studio. Nixon, thank you so much for joining us on The Globe. A couple of days for his release, former Vice President of the DRC, Bemba, after 10 years. Take us through that. What exactly happened and why so long for his release? But let's just put the witness tampering case aside. Was there no case against him?
Well, it depends on the International Criminal Court of Justice processes. One have to understand that there is a case that happened in the DRC, I mean in the Central African Republic, and rather than DRC where he comes from, where he had sent his own militia to the Central African Republic to assist the then President Ange Felix Patasse to ward off the mutiny of then President of the Central African Republic, who was trying to fight, mutiny within his own rebels. So it's a question of how does the international justice processes have emerged in this case, and trying to show that justice is served for those who were actually victims of war crimes in the Central African Republic vis-a-vis to those who are the perpetrators. But if you look at this case, Bemba was not in direct command of his own militias in the Central African Republic.
So was this
that is the question.
Was this expected?
But this was expected in a sense that he had the militias that he had sent to the Central African Republic. But the question is, was he in direct control of those militias? The answer is no. And who are in direct control of those militias? Why are not they be brought to justice at the International Criminal Court of Justice to answer for the said criminal war crimes that have been committed in Central African Republic?
Now, let's speak about former Vice President Bemba. Who is he in terms of the DRC's politics in today's terms? It's 10 years later.
It's 10 years later, but remember, Bemba still, quote unquote, a senator within the Democratic Republic of Congo's parliament, which have the upper house and the lower house, the parliament and the Senate. So he's still a senator, despite being at the ICC for 10 years. And he has played a critical role being from a warlord that was supported by Uganda, then getting to the DRC in 2003 to 2006, under the Sun City Accord, upon reaching government of national unity towards the first democratically elections of the DRC, and him having coming the second in those elections. But by the way, they said that he win according to contestations. You know what transpired in 2006 until Western diplomats, more than a dozen of them, had to unite in a meeting with him to trying to convince him that he should accept the win of Joseph Kabila. And eventually tussles issuing between Kabila's army and Bemba's army in Kinshasa, and eventually him being taken to the ICC. So he still have that role within the DRC politics. But also, owing to the long history of his own role, even the father, who is Bemba Saolona, who was one of the central bank governor of the Zaire then under Mobutu Sese Seko. So he still has so much influence in the country. So
does
politically,
he still have power to go back to the DRC? The elections are taking place in December. Does he still have power within the people? He has been a Senate member, as you say, for 10 years, as he's been arrested in jail at the ICC. But now, does he still have the power? Will the voters, if he comes back to the DRC, vote for him? Well,
that depends on the dynamics of politics within the DRC. First of all, he still have a political party with MLC, Mouvement de Libération Congolais, which is led by actually some of his lieutenants, like Eve Bazaiba, who is the Secretary General of that movement. By the way, a member of the Pan-African Parliament, whom I spoke to for a couple of few weeks ago. And they still hoped that Bemba is returning to the country. But if you look at the nature of the politics within the DRC, you would understand that most people are not in agreement with the current regime. And the only alternative are the political opponent of the current regime trying to take wrestle control of the elections with the coming up in December. So Bemba, in so doing, if he has that capacity to return to the country, I'm sure, and we have seen celebration in Kinshasa upon his release, not only in Kinshasa, but in the east of the DRC, in cities like Goma, in cities like Sangani, in cities like Bunia. Across the country, there were massive celebrations upon his release. That shows that the man still have a clout within the people of the DRC.
Now, with elections coming up in December, the country's prime minister made an announcement that President Joseph Kabila will not be seeking another term. Was this expected, firstly? And secondly, would this change if Bemba were to return to the country?
I think that will not change anything. First of all, the political situation in the DRC is a more complex one than one could imagine. You have to understand that Joseph Kabila himself as the president has not come out clearly to denounce that he's not going to contest elections. Two, within his own political party, the PPRD, which is the agglomeration of many political parties coming assembly together saying that they are political majority, they have not named his successor within that political movement. So that begs the question, who is the candidate for the ruling party? That is one question on the other hand. On the other hand of the opposition, we have a fragmented opposition. We have the likes of Moise Katumbi trying to come up and, forming up alliances with other political parties to form this umbrella called the Ensemble to contest the elections. But what intrigued many political analysts and those who watch the politics in the DRC will understand that Moise Katumbi himself has been indicted for having two nationalities. And that begs the question, who will fill the vacuum then? If you look at the likes of Felix Tshisekedi, well, he comes in after the death of his father. He does not have a popular appeal within the Congolese nations. So on top of that, he has this sort of a tribal alliances of the Luba in the Central Democratic Republic of Congo, not having a national appeal on across the spectrum of political divide in the country. So that poses a challenge. And the release of Jean-Pierre Bemba poses a critical questions on who is Bemba coming back? And if he's coming back, what is he going to do? Now, there are international dynamics that one have to look at. On the 25th of May this year, the former Secretary of State for African Affairs, Herman Cohen, wrote a letter to the ICC to say that he believes that Bemba should be released. He still have much popular support within the DRC. He still have a role to play to save the country from its current political situation where it is now. Now that tells you the strings that are being pulled from behind to get this man into back into the democratic processes that happen in the country.
Now, Nixon, the case of witness tampering, that still is over is hanging over Bemba's head. And in that same breath, can he still go back to the DRC and contest for the presidency with that case not being finalized?
Oh, well, I think we will agree with my learned colleague who have studied jurisprudence. That they will tell you that once you have been acquitted, that means you have no case to answer. And the ICC, by its own admission, have said that Bemba have no case to answer by its own court of appeal. Now, what is happening is that the witness tampering questions is a byproduct of the case that was before the court that has been rejected. On top of that, he was supposed to serve 18 years according to the ICC's ruling. Now, the current case that is before the court have a maximum sentence of 5 years. The man has spent 10 years in prison. So that tells it all.
Now, Nixon, the opposition of the DRC is basically calling for election reforms. And, you know, what are the existing problems that are happening currently within the DRC? You mentioned the fact that President Kabila hasn't stood out or come out and said it himself that he would be stepping down. There is no succession plan, as you mentioned, that is known. It's a fragmented opposition. What are the reforms that they're calling for before the elections take place in December?
I think there are a number of reforms, and those reforms are from the fact that the organization of elections has not been transparent, has been one side. The government said that we are organizing elections, but without the participation of all stakeholders, including the opposition parties. That's where the problem comes. If you look at how the registration of the voters has happened, it is not clear who has been registered among the 76 million presumed Congolese, because the last census was in 2001. So one would say that who is the real voter here? And who, in case there have been deaths since the war has ravaged the country, who are the voter who on the voters' roll, those who have died and those are existing, and the young who were not present for the first elections in 2006. So that poses a strategic challenge on how the elections are going to be organized. But not only that, you have a country which have no national identity. So it poses a question that even those foreign nationals who have been in the country that can actually participate in the election that they are not supposed to be participating in. So
now, Nixon, sorry to come in there. I've got one very quick question as we wrap up. In terms of the opposition, they've come out and stated that the regional bodies or the regional blocs, for instance, SADC and, you know, obviously the African Union, have not done much to assist in ensuring that free and fair elections take place in the DRC and in preparations to the elections in December. What's your take on that? And what are the issues there? Very quickly, we have run out of time.
That is a very complex question, and I'm afraid that we cannot answer it in one minute that we have in this interview. Because if you look at how the evolution of war has happened and all the entire political quagmire leading up to the Sun City negotiations and the Lusaka Accord, and pulling in almost 6 armies of the region from this very SADC region, which forms a part of the African Union. So you have countries within the SADC region and the Central African region, even the AU itself, which have a vested interest in the political dynamics of the DRC. Owing to that it's a country with the natural resources, so anyone will have to protect their own economic interests, both on the political side. So
Nixon,
to answer to that is that the African Union in itself is hopeless in resolving the question of the DRC owing to the geostrategic position of the country.
Unfortunately, as you mentioned, vested interests. I wish we could take this further, but we'll leave it there for now and we'll take it up on another day. That was analyst and Channel Africa reporter Nixon Katembo joining us live in studio.